Welcome to episode 21 of the Normless podcast, and this is Simon Fenech.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Simon. It's a pleasure to hear you, and I'm sure, no doubt, that anyone listening to this podcast is going to be really intrigued and enthralled by your story. You know, it's one of overcoming obstacles and hurdles, and it's one of regaining your life back. Really, you came from a time where you were growing up as a young boy and you had everything. You had a family, you were living on a farm, you were a great close knit family, and your life took a turn, and it took a turn for the worst, and we're going to hear about that now. But one thing that really, I guess, intrigued me was, a lot of the time when we hear about prisoners and people who have been to jail, a lot of the time they have had that tough upbringing, and whether it be, they haven't had their father figure or mother or father, or, that close circle of family, or they haven't had the opportunities that a lot of us have in our early lives, obviously living in a country like Australia. Although, for you, it was very different tale. You had all that. Tell us a bit about your upbringing, and then we'll go into more of the story about how you actually got to imprisonment.
Sure. So I had a really good upbringing. I had a great mother and father, great brothers. Grew up on a farm. Never wanted for anything. Had the whole white picket fence and 2.5 kids in mind from a young age, and never any dilemmas. So really, everything I touched in my life had turned to gold growing up.
And I understand that your father or your parents were from European descent, and you also had 2 older brothers, and they were really good role models for you. They taught you about, resilience and growing up and good manners and all those sorts of values that you developed as a young boy. And eventually, you got married at the age of 19. You were fit. You're into your kickboxing, I understand. Australian champion. You had it all. You had the good jobs, Mercedes-Benz, Harley-Davidson. So where did it kind of all go wrong from there?
Well, it all went sour after a workplace accident. So, as you said, I was fit as a fiddle, 2 times Australian kickboxing champion, South Pacific kickboxing champion. And one day, whilst I was at work, I was struck in the back with a forklift, damaging my lower spine, and that's where my life started to turn sour.
Yeah, and so I understand, as you say, you got struck in the back by a forklift. So that would have been your lumbar spine. What exactly, do you know the name of the injury or what actually occurred?
Yeah, I think it's L4, L5, and they burst the gel pocket between the 2 discs.
Right.
I had nerve damage, and I was in constant pain 24/7. It would go away for a short period of time and come back. I could stand for a while, it would ache. I would sit for a while, it would ache. I would lay for a while, it would ache. I was constantly in pain, and the doctors put me on all these different medications, sleeping tablets, nerve relaxants, painkillers, antidepressants. And I was still in a deep, dark hole, always in pain. We even tried a lot of medical treatments like hydrotherapy. I did a spinal therapy every day of the week. Where you'd jump in the pool, you'd see a doctor, you'd see a physio, and nothing worked. I was in pain all the time, and going from being really fit and hardworking to being stuck in your bedroom while wasn't even my bedroom actually. It was the spare room downstairs. Was it was really depressing as well.
So were you doing kickboxing at that time when you
Yeah,
had the
so
injury?
we're actually talking about making a comeback. I was probably at one of my peaks in fitness as well. Not only not only was I super fit, but I had a great circle of friends. We'd go riding Harleys together. It was really active. It wasn't too long after I bought a new house, so we was doing up all the garden there. So in the driveway lay about 6 meters of pebble, which sat there for a very long time after I was injured. I can tell you.
And so I guess in that sense, you went from what we were talking about before, how you had all those material possessions, you had the family, you paid off your house by the age of 27, I understand, which is,
Correct.
especially in this day and age, massive feat.
Yeah.
Um, and then taking away the kickboxing, I know what, it's like when you have something in your life, like health, your health and fitness, it's really important to you in terms of not only your physical well-being, but also your mental health, and then also your ability to interact and socialize with people depends a lot on those things. It really is a knock-on effect. So once you stripped away your physical well-being and you're in pain, no doubt you're ruminating about your pain, and this was impacting your ability to work. Obviously, you couldn't
Yeah.
stand up for long periods, could you?
Yeah. Couldn't work. Impacting on my marriage. I watched my wife go to work, and I couldn't even pick my kids up. My back was that sore. Couldn't take them to the park. Couldn't do anything really. So the depression starts to sink in because you actually feel like a failure of a husband, a failure of a father, a failure of a man. You feel useless. And that starts playing games with you as well. Not, you know, I was always taught strong European wog family. The man brings home the bread. Well, I wasn't bringing home the bread, mate. I was bringing nothing home. You know.
And it's you were talking about there your wife, so you had a divorce and you had your kids there, and you've actually your relationships with those people took a turn for the worst as well. So we were talking about that. You lost, your physical well-being, all your possessions, your social connectedness and family, everything went out the window. And there was 12 months there where you're in a wheelchair, you're basically bedridden, or you could only stand for short periods of time and sit down for short periods of time. You tried physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, acupuncture, spinal therapy. You're on antidepressants, and you're taking over the counter prescription medications, and nothing seemed to work.
Yeah. So we tried everything. And nothing worked. And if you can picture isolating yourself in a room in your home and not wanting to see or hear from anybody, if there was a knock at the door, I wouldn't answer it. If the phone rang, I wouldn't answer it. The curtains were drawn; it was all dark, and that's the way. That's how I lived my life for 12 months. Yeah.
And so you had an acquaintance who's come along. At this stage, you're probably feeling pretty low in terms of the love department. Not many people are really been reaching out to you too much. You've withdrawn from a lot of your circles, friendship circles, but also the workforce. But one gentleman comes knocking, an acquaintance, and he offers you something that, was really the start of a big change in your life.
Yeah, it was. It was. So he the first time he came round, he brought some marijuana with him, and he said, "Try this. This is supposed to be good for pain." Um, so I watched him. He rolled this joint, and we had a couple of puffs, and I thought, "Oh, this is not for me," because I started feeling stoned, and that everything started to slow down. That pain started to
Get
last for
worse.
longer and longer,
Yeah.
and all I could do was actually concentrate on my pain. And I sent him away. I said, "Mate, forget about it. That's not for me." And he's a persistent bugger. Do I dislike this bloke? Probably not, because in his own world and his own way, he was only trying to help me. My what led to my life downward spiraling was my own choices, and he came back a couple of weeks later, and this time he brought some ice with him, methamphetamines. And I'd heard about ice, but had absolutely no idea about how addictive it would be. It looked very harmless. It was not in any, you didn't have to inject it. So, breathing in some smoke did not seem like it was going to be a problem for big, strong Simon. All right. I was very wrong.
Very wrong.
I was very wrong.
And so talk to us about that next 12 months. That was
Sure.
a tough
So
time.
I'll probably go into. I'd like to talk about how powerful that drug is, and not for 1 second do I condone ice use, because there were small portions of it that helped me, and the rest of it destroyed my life. But I watched him put this small crystal type substance into a glass pipe and put a cigarette lighter underneath it, melt the substance, and he said, "Inhale this." And I did. I took one long, deep breath. And, I don't know whether you've ever smoked cigarettes, but cigarettes make you cough, right? It's very heavy on your chest. This was not like that at all. It was actually quite smooth. I inhaled it, and instantly I thought, wow, instantly, from that very first time, I knew that I was in trouble, because this was an amazing feeling. And, I wasn't concentrating on my back anymore. I wasn't concentrating on the darkness. As I said, I'm a wog, right? So every hair from the tip of my toe to the back of my neck stood up, and there's quite a lot of hair now, especially. And I felt amazing. It wasn't an instant cure, but at least my mind was no longer a prisoner of my body. And with that very first time, I rang up everybody I knew and said, "Hey, I'm making a comeback to kickboxing. I'm coming back to work, and let's go riding on the weekend." Mouth was running 100 miles an hour quicker than my brain. Only for that feeling to run out about 48 hours later and be in more pain than ever before, because I had overdid what I was supposed to do, and I had used up any dopamine that I had in that little brain of mine, that made me happy. There was nothing left in the tank.
Yeah, and I can understand that, because you talk about physiotherapy, you talk about hydrotherapy. All of these things are very much, longer term solutions. You see a physiotherapist on a regular basis over a prolonged period of time with the understanding that you're going to regain your physical ability and manage your pain, whether it be through an exercise physiologist, manage your pain through movement and physical, or medications over time, pain management medications. But this gave you that short-term buzz, and it really enabled you for a day or two to be able to get out there and move. We understand it's a real quick short-term fix. A lot of what people look for these days, whether it be with food, Uber Eats and those dopamine hits with social media, you just wanted to feel
good,
free of pain for a short period of time, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, just wanted to forget for just for a little bit. But the come down was intensified by 1,000. So it was ugly, and the medications were doing absolutely nothing. And the only solution in my head was to get more ice, and that's where my habit started.
So in that period, Simon, when you initially took this first puff of ice, and you called up all your friends and family and that kind of thing, and you said you'll come back to kickboxing. In those 2 days, when you said you overdid it, did you go back to kickboxing? Did you go out?
No, I didn't. But what I did do is I got up and did some cooking. I did a little bit of cleaning, and my ex-wife now at the time was looking at me funny, thinking, what is wrong with him? Why are the curtains open and the windows are open? And who really cooked this food? Because previously to that, I was no good for nothing, right? So she was not stupid. She knew there was something not right.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
so this is as we said, the start of that downward spiral. You felt useless. You felt as though your pain had gotten worse after that when you'd taken the ice. So you were having those withdrawals, and then you had to go back in. So you thought, I'm going to self-medicate.
correct.
And this really had a big impact on a lot of
Yeah.
things.
I mean, I thought, the guy said to me that I used $100 worth of ice or smoked $100 worth of ice that day. So I thought, mate, $100, it's going to last me 2 days, right? $50 a day. I can do this,
Yeah.
right? So I rang you up and said, can you bring me some more of that stuff? Here's $100. And it was nowhere near as powerful the second time, but it still got me up, right? And, so I thought I'll keep using $100 worth every couple of days. That's where it started, because it went from 100 to 200 to 300 to 500 to 700, and in the end, I was using over $1,000 worth of ice a day. Right, so I just needed more and more and more to get where I was the very first time, and I never actually quite got there anyway.
And in order to fund a dirty habit like that, you obviously need to be making money, don't you?
Correct.
$1,000 a day,
Correct.
$7,000 a week. That's
Yeah.
a hefty sum of money per annum. So what were you doing to finance that habit?
So in that world, or the world of addiction, you either do one or two things to survive or maintain your habit. You either deal drugs or you steal. I never made much of a thief, so I started dealing drugs. And I was dealing drugs at a medium level in the market. I worked out very quickly that if I bought in bulk, I would get better quality and get it at a cheaper price. And then whilst dealing drugs, I met the most unsavory characters I've ever come across in my life. Whilst dealing drugs, I was shot in the thigh, and I was stabbed 3 times in the back of the neck, and I was nearly killed. Um, I had dealt. I've never dealt with people like that in my life. Did not know what to expect. I was a farm boy, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with people from the underworld, which was a completely different kettle of fish to what I was used to.
So
You know,
was these stabbings from attempted theft? That would have been the other side of
yeah,
the coin that you would have had to go through to get your ice. Is that correct?
yeah. What happened was, in this process, I had started up a wrecking yard. I'd rented a factory, and I was wrecking cars. Um, this is probably a year and a half, 2 years later, wrecking cars at a factory in Hoppers Crossing, Melbourne's west, and three guys tried to stand over me for money and drugs. And when I said no, they shot me and then stabbed me 3 times. Nearly took my head off. I had a very thick silver chain, and the on the third stabbing, the point of the knife got caught in the silver chain, and that's what stopped it from severing my spinal cord.
Yeah.
So I was very
That's
lucky.
crazy. You, for one reason or another, you managed to survive this, and there has to be some silver lining, doesn't there, Simon, with all of this?
Yes, yeah, and in the very depths of all that, the stabbing, the shooting, the dealing, um, in a world of pain, to top things off, my father dies, and a short time later, my brother dies, and 3 months after that, my mother dies, and then 12 months after that, my daughter dies. Um, so again, in that world, to mask the pain, I just used more and more and more drugs. So I didn't have to feel anything. Didn't want to be here anymore.
So at that stage, you had been addicted for about 7 years. Is that correct? You've been
Correct.
selling for about
Yep.
2.
Correct.
And so in those 2 years,
Yeah.
you had all those deaths within the family. You've been stabbed 3 times. Your 12-month-old baby daughter dies.
Correct.
And then also we've had cops come in now and they've raided
Yeah.
the car yard, and that was when you were sent to court a number of times.
Yeah. So you didn't have to be Einstein to see that this wrecking yard was operating 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
The coppers would drive past and think, what's going on in there? And, after numerous police raids, and each time the coppers would find drugs, I was sentenced to 12 months in prison.
And it was pretty lenient sentence, wasn't it? Based on
It was, so one thing I didn't talk about is after my daughter died, I'd had 5 suicide attempts. And that's how low my life got. Like, for a long period of time, I'd wake up in the morning and try and think of a way that I was going to top myself. And I tried numerous ways. And how I sit here today and have this conversation, I will never know. But I'm ever so grateful that I did survive that. But the judge was very empathetic when she had heard what I had been through. She deliberated on the case over a 2-month period. Once she heard all the evidence and the prosecutor, and I was sentenced to 12 months. I was expecting 3 to 5 years. I deserved to go to jail because I was breaking the law. So I have no qualms about going to jail at all.
I think what saved you is kind of your willingness to be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
But also, I guess, your character. And you talk about this, but you never really did much during your time being a kickboxing athlete. A lot of what you did was you were a homebody. You didn't go out partying too much. You rarely took any, might have taken illicit drugs on 1 or 2 occasions when you were out, but you really stayed out of trouble for most part of your life. So it wasn't like you're a repeat offender, were you?
Yeah, I was never ever interested in trouble. And, even the times where I had gone out and I'd go out with my kickboxing friends, some of them were of a different opinion that they could cause trouble and, and do some damage. And I was always the opposite. I would just leave them there because that was not my thing. My thing was always doing the right by people.
Yeah.
I would try and help people even on my worst day.
Do you think it was kind of like because of that, the lack of exposure and experience to those drugs, it was like a baptism of fire? You got your first puff of that ice and then you were hurled in and you didn't quite know how to manage things in that car yard and, being able to cover that up.
Yeah, I think being introduced to a whole new breed of people, people who I have never, people that you only hear about, people that I only imagined. Like I got ripped off. I'll never forget this. I got ripped off. I sold some drugs or some ice to a 75-year-old man.
Wow.
Right, and he ripped me off, right? Because never in a million years would I have thought that someone of that age could rip somebody off, right? But along the way, I heard all the stories in the world. I had another guy who I thought was a fairly decent guy who used to come in with his son, and he ran up his son was about 9 or 10 years old. He ran up a fairly decent debt, and one day he came in crying, telling me that he couldn't pay the debt because his son had just died, and he needed to pay. He needed to pay for a funeral. And me being me said, look, don't worry about what you owe me, and here's a couple of grand towards the funeral, right? Yeah. About 6 weeks later, I pull up at the service station, and there he is with his son. Right? So I'm thinking, when you're in the depth of depression and people run rings around you like that, you start to think very little of yourself, I can tell you.
Yeah, and throughout that time, so all this time you've had your divorce, you've had to sell the family house, correct? And
Yep.
all your cars and possessions and things as well.
Yep.
Your son, and your children, you're not really taking much of a part in their lives. You've met this new partner as well, who was on ice as well. So,
Yeah.
and you said this become a really toxic relationship.
Yes.
That made things worse, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Again, your whole life just changes. The people that are good for you in your life, you push away, and it seems like you just surround yourself by other people, other drug users. And along the way, I entered a numerous relationships, but one in particular with a lady who was still using drugs, and today we have a son together.
And I think one question I have for you is you've talked about how the start of one of the days where you actually tried to commit suicide was when you were driving to I think it was Armadale, but the reason you were driving to Armadale, I think, was because you were seeing a counsellor. Is that correct?
Yeah, a new counsellor. That's correct.
And so one of the things I think that I've noticed with your story is that you actually had quite a problem with these counsellors and accepting them. It was almost like through the process of dealing drugs, you had developed this lack of trust for people through the experiences of, as you said, like people ripping you off and that kind of thing. But do you feel like being around people in that, with regards to dealing and taking those drugs, you became more trusting of certain people within your circles, and the people that loved you and that cared for you would, oftentimes have those stronger conversations, about changing your life and making changes. And because you were so ingrained in this new drug addiction, you couldn't have those conversations, or you couldn't see almost what was happening before your eyes. And that was kind of what led you to being around more of these unsavory characters as well.
The truth be was I didn't want to know. My brother, who is a justice of the peace, has never done a thing wrong by anybody, would try and help me and steer me the right direction. I did not want to know. Uh, I did not want to be helped, or I didn't really want to be helped. And I didn't think that anybody could help me. To be honest with you, I had seen numerous counsellors. I had I had sought many different medical opinions, and nothing really helped. Nothing really helped me.
And so what happened there? You're driving to Armadale, and you're driving your truck there, and
No, I was actually I was driving my car.
your car,
My license was disqualified.
right?
My car was unregistered, and I was flat broke. And and the car that I was driving was on empty, on the fuel
Fuel
gauge,
gauge, yeah.
and I was that desperate to see if somebody could actually make a change. If there was a magic fix for me, I took the run anyway from Melbourne's west out to Armadale, get to Armadale, sat in the chair for an hour, waiting for this counsellor, and then get in there to see them. And the counsellor was more worried about where the doctor had signed that he wasn't going to get paid for the session, right? So for 45 minutes of the session, he spent on the phone trying to work out if he was going to get paid for the session or not. And the other 15 minutes, he got me to fill in all these multiple choice questions. So I just felt like that was a complete waste of time, right? I was absolutely shattered. I remember sitting in my car out the front for about an hour. And when I decided to make the trip home, knowing very well that I never had enough petrol to get home, knowing very well that I was driving an unregistered car and I had no license, that I would probably get pulled over, I decided to make my way home. And as I was driving over the Westgate Bridge, the car started to run out of petrol. And I was driving, from side to side to try and get every little bit of petrol out of that tank. And I made it all the way out to Laverton, and the car broke down. I was on the side of the road. It was about 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. And I had no credit on my phone, and I couldn't have rang a soul anyway, because I don't think there was anyone who could have came and helped me. So after sitting behind the wheel for about an hour, shitting myself that the coppers are going to come or somebody was going to come, I said, I can't do this no more. And I got out of the car, walked around to the front, and waited for a truck to come down the freeway.
And so the truck hit you. You flew about 10, 15 meters onto the road, and then the back of the truck came swinging around, didn't it? And you...
Yeah, that's right. I saw a truck. I saw the orange lights coming, and I waited for him to get close enough, and I stood out in front of that truck, went flying in the air, landed on the road, and then I watched the trailer jackknife and go sliding over 3 lanes, and then I was on the road thinking, oh, he's going to run me over, right? So I scatter up and start running, and I ran away. It was a big Mercedes Benz. I never forget that, because the emblem, I think I still got an imprint on my shoulder where it hit me. But I remember thinking, oh, I don't want to get squashed. Right? I thought maybe just the impact would kill me, and I got up and I ran away. And black and blue for days and days after that. But how I survived that, I will never know.
So were you high at that point in time?
Yeah, definitely.
And with your pain, how was it after that accident? Because I can imagine you just be completely shattered after that. Were you in hospital, or did you get any severe injuries from that accident?
No severe injury. I mean, very, very sore, but no severe injuries at all. Just really bad bruising.
Wow.
Which also amazed me.
And then the next thing amazes me even more, Simon. When you put the sawn off shotgun down your throat. So talk us through that suicide attempt. So how many suicide attempts were there over the course?
Five in total.
Yep.
And the shotgun one, to be honest with you, I think of on a daily basis, and I am still amazed, bewildered on how I survived that. I was staying at my brother's holiday house in St. Leonard's on bail. After the stabbing and shooting, I was always looking over my shoulder, because I never knew what was going to come from where. So I had bought myself a sawn-off shotgun for my own protection, but feeling very alone and in that world. One day I thought I had had enough, so I was going to check out. I had wrote a suicide letter. I had a box of bullets, which I reached into the box and pulled the shiniest bullet out, whacked it into the gun. I had done this many times, but this time that I actually pulled the trigger. A bullet went off, and the next thing that I know, I was being driven to the Barwon hospital in Geelong, the Barwon psych ward. The bullet that I had put in the gun was one that they use for the cockies, to scare the cockies. So there was actually no ammunition in there. just a plastic wad that went off and blew the back of my mouth out. I had blood coming out of my nose and my ears, and I was taken to the psych ward in Geelong.
That's intense.
Yeah,
So, do you have any ongoing, I guess, complications from that? Whether it be, no,
no. And to top things off, when I went to this, when I got to the psych ward, I remember these two massive coppers from Port Arlington Police Station took me there in the back of their 4-wheel drive, and I sat there for about 4 hours, and the doctor reviewed me, heard what I had done, all of the above, and they gave me like 3 or 4 Valium and said, "Look, are you planning on harming yourself again?" And I said no, because by then all I wanted to do was go use more drugs, right? I just wanted out of there. And they said, "Well, off you go then." So they gave me 4 Valium and sent me home.
It's a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the mental health system.
Stupid.
I remember my brother. He actually, he lived in Werribee at the time. He came and picked me up, and he was just so disappointed and distraught. And he would wait by the phone, just waiting for that phone call to say, "Your brother is dead. Your brother has finished himself off, or he's overdosed, or he used to wait for that phone call." And I'm all he's got left, and he's all I got left. We only got each other. So even just speaking to you about this today constantly reminds me of what I did to that poor guy.
And I guess one thing that we haven't really, I guess, deciphered is one of your brothers, justice of the peace, the other brother who passed away was also hooked on ice before he had his massive heart attack. So at this point in time, Simon, you had 2 children. One was 8. One was 12 years old. Were they able to fathom, and come to terms with what you were actually trying to do to yourself at this point in time? Could they come to grips with it? Did they know what was happening? Do you think they were old enough?
I don't think. I don't think they actually knew what or the depths to what I was doing. After I had got, so I was, I had shared custody, and after I had got shot and stabbed, it was not safe for me to be around my kids. And then I became ashamed of myself because I wasn't a father's arsehole. There was numerous times where we had arranged to spend a day together, go to the zoo or go to the park, and I was delayed by hours because I was always waiting for somebody to drop money off or drop drugs off or whatever the case may be. I was an unfit father, a non-deserving father, and I was useless to him. And when I wanted to check out, I had convinced myself that my kids were better off without me. And to be honest with you, probably at that point they were. Yeah.
And so, was this the last of your suicide attempts, or what?
Yeah.
What were the other? So, what were the other 3? Were they just?
They were prior. I tried gassing myself. I had an old Ford V8, XY Ford V8. I ran a couple of hoses to the exhaust pipe. I tried gassing myself in the car, and the car had run out of fuel. I'd woke up on the floor, slumped in between the car and the garage wall, and the engine light was still on. The car had run out of fuel. That was another one where I tried to hang myself, and just as I kicked the chair out from underneath me, the owner of the house where I was staying had come in and pulled me off the rope. I was, for a long time, I would look for a way to check out because I just did not want to be here no more.
So, I guess in terms of those suicide attempts, one thing that is really hard for me to understand is, if I'm going for a walk up on a headland and I'm, with my partner or family, and I think about, how do people jump off this cliff? How do people take their own life? What is that? What was the difference between you pulling the trigger and on the other occasions where you couldn't pull the trigger? Is it just a sense of complete hopelessness? I imagine it's hard to describe, but if you had to put this into words, this feeling, how low was a point in your life where you actually felt like you could pull that trigger?
That is something that I can absolutely not explain apart from just being in so much internal pain that you cannot see a future. You cannot get from day to day. You're in total darkness on a sunny day. You cannot see one good thing. It's the cup half empty in every situation, and no light at the end of the tunnel. That is the only way, and I'm not doing it any justice at all. But being in constant pain on the inside, where you cannot see any brightness, any humor, any joy, all you feel is ugliness.
Wow. Yeah, it's as you say, I imagine you're not doing it justice there in your words, but I'm sure there's some people potentially listening that I know we spoke to Troy Jones in an earlier episode, and he ran from Perth to Sydney, and he talks about the moment he was on the Cronulla Shire, and he went to the Kurnell Cliffs and considered jumping off the cliff there after breaking up with one of his partners, and he didn't do it, but he kind of put that into really succinct terms where he said that you have these swirling emotions and you just can't grasp. You try and grasp the most logical thing, and at that moment in time for him it was to almost just remove himself from the earth. But obviously we know it's a very erratic thought, and it can lead to, in a short-term moment, can lead to long-term devastations for not only yourself taking your life, but also all the people around you. Because we know this story does take a turn, and that's why you're here today talking with us.
I had convinced myself that the world was better without Simon Fenech. Had I have succeeded, I would have hurt a lot of people, and I would never be able to be the person I am today, obviously.
And so you went to Fulham prison, correct? What was that first night in prison like? You're locked up. You basically had no freedom to do, despite you being, bedridden for a lot of the past couple of years with pain and immobility, and your crippling drug addiction. Now you didn't have that freedom. What were those first days to weeks like for you, Simon?
So my first stint until I was sentenced was at the Melbourne Remand Centre, and I really struggled. We were in 22-hour lockdown, so you were let out for an hour in your pod, and then you were let out an hour in the yard. Let out for an hour in the yard. I was in a cell with another guy, and we would get fed through the slot in the door in a little plastic container, and just as you're about to start eating your dinner, he would take a shit less than a meter and a half away from you. If that wasn't an eye opener, nothing was. Coming off all the drugs, with no professional help, left to your own devices in that cell, and coming to the realization and really feeling the loss of the family that had passed away, even though it was years after. Um, it felt like it did not happen. So reliving all that, as you're coming off the drugs, for months, um, and looking for help, and there's no help. Um, Sleeping on a 2-inch thick mattress under a window with no glass, a mesh window. You know what? Jail's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to teach you a lesson. I I think it should be hard, right? I learned a lot about myself while I was in jail. If I have to be 100% honest, I think jail saved my life, because jail gave me an opportunity to rehabilitate myself. Nobody was giving me the opportunity for rehabilitation outside, but I rehabilitated myself in jail.
See, and the food it was what, cold, just shit meat, what was it?
I'll give you a couple of examples.
Like plain food or worse?
Well, sometimes your breakfast would rock up. It would be four or six pieces of freezing cold toast made hours before, and in the center of the toast was like a tablespoon of jam, right? And sometimes you'd get that at 11 o'clock, right? And then you'd get your lunch at 12, right? And if you think plain food's bad, this is the next best thing to dog shit. It's putrid, right? I think they feed prisoners in Australia for $8 a day, and that is 3 meals. 3 meals. So you can imagine what you eat. Um, there's nothing to write home about prison food. As I went on in my sentence, and I went to Fulham prison, the food was a bit better there. You actually got some meat from time to time. It wasn't just all bread or potatoes or pasta.
You talk about the remand centre, and you talk about the Fulham prison, but also I think one of the stories which I remember from your time serving was the initial stages in custody.
Oh yeah.
With a couple other guys, and that was a real
Yes.
baptism of fire too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Look, when you first get locked up before you're awaiting court, they take you to the yellow sub. It's called. It's the Melbourne Custody Centre, and it's underneath the courthouse in Melbourne, and it is the most putrid conditions you could imagine. There's about 6 to a cell. Everybody is detoxing, coming off the alcohol, the drugs. They're angry because they've just been locked up, so they're violent. Some are throwing up. One toilet in that room. There's no sunlight, so you don't see sunlight for weeks. That is the end of the earth.
There's one mattress, freezing cold floor. You had
Correct.
to fight for a blanket, didn't you? And
you had to fight for a blanket. Correct.
You want to be fighting for a blanket with all these guys that are coming down off their drugs,
Correct.
angry. And I imagine one of the questions I got from one of the listeners was, what would be the worst experience you ever had in prison? I think now's a pertinent time to ask that. In that time when you're at Fulham or custody, or you're in the remand centre, what was probably one or two of the worst things you either saw, were a part of, heard from any of the?
I'll tell you, one of them. At one stage, they put me in the psych ward for a very short period of time, and it is pretty much a padded cell with a TV behind a big fiberglass wall, and you are in a thick apron like a doona, and you're nude, and your food comes all chopped up in little pieces, and I don't know what food that was. The TV would be playing in the background, and it was on music videos, and the music videos would just dredge up old memories, MTV, which made it even worse. That was pretty bad. The first initial feeling like that you're locked up knowing that you cannot get out of that cage, that was also pretty bad. Every time you were being transported or had a visitor, actually having to bend over and spread your ass cheeks, that was pretty bad too. So a couple of bad things I saw. Saw a couple of young guys really get picked on by some pretty senior guys, and you don't actually have the power to do or say anything. You just have to shut your mouth and pretend you don't see anything. And I also saw a guy get a few holes put in him because he owed a debt for cigarettes.
That was in prison. Did you see much getting knives, weapons, drugs into prison? Was there any of that?
There are plenty of drugs. Plenty of drugs. Drugs are very easy accessible in prison, and if it's not if it's not illegal, they seem to dope you up on as many legal ones as possible to keep everybody calm in the house. Did not see a lot of violence. Pretty much kept to myself. Didn't roll in any circles. Just really looked after myself. And the biggest thing that drove me crazy in jail was listening to bullshit talk. I met a lot of people in jail. I met a lot of good guys, a lot of fathers who just wanted to see their kids. I met guys who were there on traffic infringements, and I met a lot of people who should never be released because they are just a menace to society and themselves. So it was a great learning experience for me. I took the opportunity whilst I was in prison to do as many programs and courses as I could to better myself. But those programs and courses aren't easy to get into. You can't just rock up and do a program. You need to book in. You need to have been there for a certain amount of time. They're quite hard to get into, but those programs helped me a lot whilst I was in jail.
Yeah, and so another question from one of the listeners, Angus Eyes, asked, was there any corruption at the time when you're in the prison system too, like the correctional services, but also when you were dealing drugs?
There is plenty of corruption out there. I've got to be careful what I say so I don't end up in trouble or get people into trouble. But let me tell you that at the time, I was dealing drugs to a police officer. If you read my book called Breaking Good, it goes into detail about the police officer. I was dealing drugs to DHS workers, people that work for council, nurses, teachers. There is plenty of corruption. And as for prison, that is the same thing as well. Plenty of drugs come into jail. It is not normally the prisoners who bring the drugs in. Drugs and tobacco. Tobacco has just as much as a currency in there as money.
Yeah, right. As I see, one of the things that I know is in the States, obviously, like those privately run prisons, they tend to be the biggest issue in terms of drugs and weaponry coming into prison. What was Fulham?
Fulham's a privatised prison.
So that's potentially one of the reasons why there was so much drugs and.
Oh, look, it wasn't rife, right? Drugs are in every prison, and now I'm in this role. I see it. I meet guys who have been to all different sorts of prisons. Drugs get into prisons. Was Fulham worse than any other prison? I don't think so. I'll tell you one thing about Fulham is it actually, because it's in the country, it's in the Gippsland area. It gives you the opportunity to rehabilitate yourself because it's quite a calming prison. I think Fulham's one of the better prisons out there actually. The remand centre was a different kettle of fish. Maximum security, concrete walls, everybody detoxing, everybody at war with each other. Codes getting codes going off every half an hour. There's alarms and sirens and lockdowns. Now that's a different kettle of fish.
So 4 to 5 months into prison, you started to come off the drugs, and this is when you started to feel all those emotions. You heard about thinking about what you had done in the past, what had happened within your life, the people you'd lost, everything that had occurred. And this is when you started to, as you said, attend those seminars and those workshops and start to learn about, overcoming loss, dealing with drug addictions and so forth. Now, you left prison in 2016, so it's now obviously 2023. It's been about 7 years now. Reflecting back on it to this period in your life when you left prison, how difficult was it to reintegrate into society? You didn't have a roof over your head, and you went on to Centrelink benefits of about $500 a fortnight.
Correct.
And I think you were paying rent like $200 a week or so. So you only had like fish and chip money to live off, 50 to 60 bucks or so. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the other struggles was, I wasn't released a free man. So when I got out of jail, it wasn't like, see you later, you've done your time. I still had to do a men's behaviour change program, a drug and alcohol program, a mental health program. I had to see, I had judicial monitoring, so I had to see the judge every month. I had to see my caseworker at corrections weekly, and I had to do 380 hours of community work, as well as try and manage a job to get off Centrelink.
Getting work was hard to come by. Most people, they see you're coming out of jail, you're an ice addict.
Yeah.
You leave a trail behind you, don't you? And no one really wants to have a part of you.
Correct. Yeah. No, every job I applied for, no one wanted to know. And like you said, I was living on $60 a week, and I was desperate. And one day, I went to see my caseworker and said, you know what, can't do this no more. I am struggling. I'm hungry. I'm broke. I was going to the Uniting Church and the Salvation Army for food parcels on a fortnightly basis, just to survive from week to week. And I said to the caseworker, can't do it. I think I'm better off back in jail because this is tough. Now I could have went, I could have went straight back to dealing because that would have been the easiest option. At least I could have got by that way. But I knew this time, if I had gone into those circles again, that I would have ended up in jail for a very long time, or ended up dead. And I didn't want that. I wanted something different. I wanted to get my kids back in my life. I wanted to prove to my brother that I could do that. I could get my life back. And I just wanted to show my kids that that I can come back from the brink, and I am there for them. And that's what I did.
And it was hard. It was hard finding your footing coming out of prison. Those initial stages. So your brother, you got the train to your brother in the city, and then he took you to Sunshine Coast, and you're expecting to turn up to this place that was going to be your home for the foreseeable future, and you were pleasantly surprised by what you saw at this boarding house, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I remember rocking up. Like you said, my brother picked me up from the train station. It took me to Melbourne's West. I rock up to the driveway of this house, and there's a car in the driveway, and all the windows were smashed, no number plates, and I'm thinking, "Fuck, what sort of place is this?" Yeah. There was a couch in the middle of the lawn, and I knocked on the door, and this lady, I could hear mumbling in the background. This lady answered the door. She was quite a large lady. She was cockeyed. One eye was looking one way, another eye was looking another way, and she was absolutely smashed on heroin. And she's saying, she's slurring her words, saying, "You must be here for the room." And she's got all these keys in her hand, like Maxim Smart. And she undoes these 3 padlocks on the door, She goes, follow me. Then undoes these three padlocks on the door. And she said, your room smells like piss because the guy in the room next door pisses on the wall and it goes into your carpet, right? And sure enough, she opens this room and the smell of piss knocked me for a six. You know, I stuck my head in and there was 3 syringes on the carpet, used syringes. And my accommodation was a mattress and base, and there was a big, dirty, rotten brown blood patch in the centre of the mattress. And that's where I was supposed to start my new life. It was putrid. And then, she's saying, now, if you go to the toilet or you go have a shower, you've got to lock the door because everything gets stolen in this house, right? And I was looking at my brother thinking, bro, help me out here. I can't stay here. And then what really scared me was she said, and my room is right across the road from yours. So if you need anything, and I mean anything, you can call me any time of the night, right? Now, I just done 12 months in prison and I was not that desperate, you know. Um, but I begged my brother if I could stay in his car because I didn't want to stay in the house. Unfortunately for me, he got me out of that house and he got me into a nice clean boarding home where I could start my new life. So I had a clean roof over my head. It was a drug-free home. Now I had a roof over my head. All I needed was a job, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be.
Well, it's incredible, and it's a bit sad to hear about that because you think about a lot of the other inmates that are coming out, and no doubt we'll talk about this when we get onto Fruit to Work and what you're doing at the moment. But I'm sure you've heard stories about inmates who have come out of correctional facilities and had similar experiences. And you think you've done all your time. You think that by coming out of prison, you should have opportunity to have at least very least a clean bed and roof over your head, not feel like you're you're at risk of relapsing and so forth.
Yeah.
So after that experience, your brothers helped you, and you can't really expect, after everything you've gone through, you can't expect that anyone was going to be there after you came out of prison either. So you got a lot to be thankful for your brother.
Correct.
But also that interaction you had where you actually were given an opportunity with Fruit to Work. So there's a flyer scrunched up in the bin, and who were you talking to at the stage? And
So I went and seen my caseworker at corrections one day, broke on the bones of my ass, and said I can't do it no more.
Yeah.
I think I'm better off back in jail because I'm hungry, broke. No one wants to give me a job, and that's where she reached into the trash can and pulls out a flyer from Fruit to Work, and it said, "We're seeking a delivery driver, and if you've got criminal history, you're encouraged to apply." Now, I thought that was too good to be true, so I got her to make a phone call and arrange an interview for me.
You didn't even have your phone. You didn't have data on your phone at that point.
No, I had no credit. Yeah, that's how broke I was. And by then I had no trust in people, so I thought again, it's a bum steer, right? But I was met by a lady who interviewed me, heard my story, and gave me a job. Right now, that job was life changing for me because even though I was in that clean boarding house, I was still broke. I did not belong anywhere. I did not feel like I still felt like a prisoner, and I was isolated to that boarding house. By getting a job meant I was given a high vis uniform. I was part of a small team. Fruit to Work was very small back then, and I started working 2 days a week, or 2 early mornings of the week because we used to start at 1:30 a.m. and I'd deliver fruit around Melbourne CBD, and people were happy to see me, and I was happy to see them because I didn't feel like an ex-drug addict. I just felt like a normal member of the public. That's the turning point. The opportunity that Fruit to Work gave me absolutely changed my life. I started working 2 days a week, 3 days a week. In a short period of time, I was working 5 days a week. I got promoted from being just a pick packer and a driver to a team leader, and I stuck that out for about 12 months. Actually, probably a bit longer, probably about 14 or 16 months, and then I was given the operations manager role, which meant that I was looking after a crew of people who were coming out of prison, going through the same issues that I was going through when I got out of prison, and I understood them, and they understood me. Today, it's a very different story. Today, I'm the general manager of Fruit to Work, and I'm one of the directors, because somebody gave me a chance. This little business that delivers fruit, milk, and pantry items completely changed my life, and I get to watch it change many people's lives.
And it's probably one of the only jobs where you can't actually have someone with the same level of empathy for the staff that are working under you, than you do have at the moment. The ability to, I guess, mentor to some extent a lot of these
Correct.
criminals coming out of prison. So, talk to us a bit more. Open up a bit more about what you just discussed it there, but as a social enterprise, a non-for-profit. The role of Fruit to Work now in the community, I guess from a more personal level, how Fruit to Work has helped you regain your feet, and how you're giving back and helping others now in the community.
Sure. So I'll do it in two parts. So Fruit to Work, by giving me that employment opportunity, it meant that I got my confidence back. I felt like a contributing member of society. I was paying tax. It gave me confidence to deal with people, to meet people in the street, and just feel like a normal person. By going in and walking into those offices and people being happy to greet you, you started to gain confidence. You did not feel like a drug addict or a scumbag or somebody that has just come out of jail anymore. On top of that, it was working with people who have been through the same sort of life experiences, and watching people grow was amazing for me. In that time, I was able to rebuild the relationship with my kids. Today, I have full-time custody of my youngest son, because I got my life back. I am able to send him to a private school. He calls me the best dad in the world. Now, I'm not the best dad in the world, but I am to him, all because somebody gave me a chance. If that opportunity didn't exist at Fruit to Work, I don't know where I would be. Fruit to Work creates meaningful transitional employment for people impacted by the justice system. So technically, it's the stepping stone for people coming out of the system. The people that can't find anywhere to live, anywhere to sleep, whilst working at Fruit to Work, they get their life back. And we keep guys and girls for anywhere between 6 and 12 months, and then we will transition them into full-time employment or another type of employment, and then bring more people through. So it's a revolving door where people are always coming through.
And so currently you have, I think, 36 employees. Is that correct?
We've grown.
More now. You've grown a fair bit more.
We've grown, and we are growing. We are growing at a rapid rate. So currently we've got 52 employees. We have transitioned over 100 people back into the community as returning citizens. We are opening another outlet of Fruit to Work in the southeast of Melbourne, in Hallam, another one in North Geelong, and we've got 2 recycling businesses that we're opening by the end of the year. So this year, Fruit to Work will open 4 new businesses. Wow. In Victoria. Next year, we're going to Queensland. So next year, we're opening in Queensland.
State.
The year after, New South Wales. What is so good about this business? I can tell you many things, but more importantly, it's a place where people come to work, they feel safe. It gives them the opportunity to grow, to work in with their parole requirements or the corrections orders. Start getting their kids back in their lives, starting to move into private rental and build themselves a better future. It is a fantastic little social enterprise.
I guess the interesting thing is that it basically inception was almost when the time you came out of prison. So you've been there to grow with the organization since its foundation and early days, which is something that's likely quite exciting for you to feel like you've been there every step of the way since coming out of prison, and it's given you that new life you have now.
I treat this business like it's my business. I love it like it's my business. I've been able to watch it grow. When I started Fruit to Work, we were turning over about $70,000 a year. This year, we just closed the books at 5.6 million. Right. There is a need for what we do. There is a want for what we do. And, it's very simple. We sell fruit, we sell milk, we sell pantry items from business to business, right? The profit that we make goes back into the community, saving the taxpayer millions and millions and millions of dollars a year. Every person that we stop from going back to prison, we save the taxpayer a couple of $100,000 a year. That's every single person.
And so Fruit to Work has 100% success rate in terms of preventing reoffenders. There's about,
correct.
So you said 100 there, so that haven't, you successfully put back into full-time work. And
correct. So not one person that has joined our program has gone back to prison. Not one. Now in Australia, 1 in 2 people being released from prison will go back within 2 years. And a lot of that is due to what we just spoke about, not having a roof over your head or not having a job. And they fall hand in hand, because if you're sleeping in the gutter, you are not going to get a job. And, if you haven't got a job, you can't afford a roof over your head.
I think a really important point to touch on before we start to wrap things up here, Simon, is when you left prison, right, you were on Centrelink and you're paying your rent $200 a week. You're making probably, you only had about $60. $60,
yeah.
$60 per week, right? And it would be really easy for you to just slip straight back into selling drugs when you're making huge profits, right? And when you think about the experiences you had coming out of prison, where you were basically forced to sleep on you didn't have to, but you were, there was a chance there you'd be sleeping on a bed that had stains of blood, piss on the floor, syringes, all that kind of thing. And if you put someone coming out of jail in that position, the first thing they're going to want to do is, you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What do we need? A roof over our head, food, water, those essentials. And if you're sleeping on a bed that's, got piss all through it, blood, syringes, you don't feel safe, then it's likely you're going to reoffend, so that you can find those essentials. So I think that there's some silver lining in this story, not only to your story, but some of the things that maybe the great things Fruit to Work is doing that we can kind of learn from. So what would be some of the biggest lessons that you've taken from your time working with Fruit to Work, and what you want to see change in the correctional system and the justice system?
Look, I'm not too interested in trying to change the system. I think that is a way bigger beast than me.
Yeah.
But along the way, if we can help people, and the advice I'd like to give people is, I am just an ordinary Joe, right? I'm not educated. I've done things hard all my life. But it took me a while to destroy my life. It takes time to get back your life. There is never a quick fix. Everything is done gradual, but if you stick at it, it will pay off. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I have not been touched on the hand or with a golden wand or any of the above. For a long time, as you heard, I wanted to be dead. Today, all I want to do is live. Today, I'm a contributing member of the community, and more importantly, I'm a father and a stepfather, and I really take those roles seriously. I was a failure of a man. Today, I'm successful. I'm successful in life itself. So, if I've got any advice for anybody, I would say, just take one day at a time and not try and take on too much. You cannot worry about what the system is doing. We cannot change the system. You can only worry about yourself, and you get on your feet on your own. But you need to stick at it.
Fantastic, mate. And not only is Fruit to Work, thriving at the moment, we look at COVID during the COVID period in 2020, and you guys actually won Social Enterprise of the Year award. As you say, you're turning over big dollars now, and thankfully for yourself as well, you met a new partner, and you guys are building or working through building a house. But is that house being fully developed now, or is it still?
Yeah. We moved into it about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow! Congratulations, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Again, on the bones of my ass, had absolutely nothing. Broke, and today, we own our own home. Yes, we're paying it off, but if I can do it, anybody can do it, because it has been a struggle. It just goes to show you that people can change their life. For a long time, didn't want to be here. Now I just want to live and enjoy the years that I've got left.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Simon. You're the epitome of a normless individual, and it's been awesome to talk to you, buddy. So thanks again.
Thanks for having me on the show, Hayden.